Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this live webinar by Artificial Solutions. I'm going to introduce myself now because I realized that by the time I switch to my slides, I'll go off camera. So my name is Carmen Del Solar. I'm a computational linguist, CAI engineer, and Teneo advocate. I joined Artificial Solutions back in 2011. I started off in Barcelona, then relocated to the US, and I'm currently based in Chicago. And today I'll be walking everyone through Artificial Solutions' new proposition, Louis to a Power of Teneo. So yeah, hoping everyone will enjoy this webinar today. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay. Great. Right. So the topic at hand today, as I said, is Louis to a Power of Teneo. So basically explaining what that means and what kind of benefits it brings to not only bot framework developers, but also Teneo developers in themselves. So here's also a slide just about myself. Since I already introduced myself, let me just maybe mention that the presentation is available through the attachments. So you can download it and check it out yourself or distribute it with your teams. Feel free to do that, along with some other recommended material on this topic. So having said that, let me just go briefly through the agenda for today. I'm going to be introducing artificial solutions for those of you here who are new to our company and are not that familiar with what we do. Then I'll be deep diving into Louis to a Power of Teneo, what it is, the value it brings to developers, and I'll be walking through two different implementation models, and I'll be doing a couple of demonstrations on those two. Then I'll finalize just briefly touching on some other initiatives that are going to allow us to go deeper into the Microsoft ecosystem. So about artificial solutions. Well, we are a NASDAQ listed company, and we provide an end-to-end CAI platform for enterprises. This platform is called Teneo, and it has been powering millions and millions of intelligent conversational experiences for over 20 years now, supporting a total of 86 languages at the moment, and deployed all around the globe. So here on the right, you can see some of our customers and partners. And also maybe worth mentioning that we hold a fair number of pioneering patents around initiatives like the hybrid NLU and the orchestration layer for routing intents, which have been cited by the major players in the CAI space, like Amazon, Apple, Google, etc. So Teneo is our main product. It is an end-to-end conversational AI platform that allows developers to take control of their CAI implementations end to end. And that means Teneo includes an IDE for development purposes. It is also a runtime environment for running your applications, and it incorporates an analytics suite. All of that accompanied by what we call Teneo languages, again supporting 86 languages at the moment. So with this in mind, the question arises, what is Luis to the power of Teneo? Well, Luis to the power of Teneo is Artificial Solutions' new proposition in partnership with Microsoft. It's a new offering aimed at both Teneo and Microsoft bot framework developers. These developers may be working in Luis or Composer or Power VAs or any combination of those. So this new proposition empowers multidisciplinary teams with an extremely comprehensive set of integrated tools and pre-built components and connectors that they will be able to leverage in their CAI applications, therefore accelerating implementation and boosting scalability. So let's focus on the three main pillars that we were just mentioning. So when we talk about Luis to the power of Teneo, we want to bring these concepts onto the table. Luis to the power of Teneo is comprehensive. It allows for faster implementations, and it ensures highly scalable solutions. So let's take a look at each one of these aspects just to understand how Luis to the power of Teneo is representing them. So we will start with comprehensive. So how is Luis to the power of Teneo comprehensive? We are currently working together with Microsoft. So you can see here there are two developers. These two developers could actually be the same person. But let's imagine there's a developer working in Luis, very familiar with Microsoft, and then there's another developer working in Teneo, very skilled in everything Teneo related. So let me just touch on a number of the tools that are kind of like signature tools for both technologies, right? So, for instance, and I'm trying to highlight here some complementary tools between both technologies, right? So, in Luis, we know we will be able to work with custom machine learned entities. We have access to a wide number of pre-built intents and domains. We can also, for instance, train our STT speech recognition language model directly from Luis using the variants that we have in our model. We can also leverage the new orchestrator that is available in Composer. For instance, this orchestrator will be able to route intents into different bots or domains, for instance. So we know we will be able to create complex models through features and patterns just to improve accuracy, and also build complex architectures where we may need to have embedded machine learning models for domains and then intent recognition, maybe. Now, in Teneo, let's take a look at some of our signature features as well. We know we have the pre-built connectors, front end and back end. We will touch on those a little bit more later. We have our conversational modules for small talk. We have our exclusive, unique hybrid NLU combining machine learning and linguistic tools, which is able to cater for follow-up questions, contextual requests, multi-intent utterances, where the user may be expressing a request that encompasses two different questions. Then with Teneo, we have support for 86 languages, where Luis, I think, supports 18 or 19, if I'm not mistaken. With Teneo, we will have the ability to test our variants within the tool. So we will have an opportunity to see how, for instance, a Luis model is performing against our solution. So that's something that can be done directly in Studio. And then we also have all sorts of scripted contexts to handle specific scenarios that would define a specific contexts. So now the idea with Luis to the power of Teneo is we bring everything together, and not only that, we also bring these two developers together under this umbrella that we call Luis to the power of Teneo. That means there is a solid integration between both technologies that will allow, for instance, Teneo developers go into this direction, meaning they will be able to leverage all of these tools within their Teneo solutions, and vice versa. Luis developers will now be able to incorporate all of the different features that are offered as part of the Teneo suite, including the analytics suite and everything. So that's what we mean with comprehensive. We are basically doubling the number of resources that we're putting in the hands of our developers. Now, when we talk about faster implementations, and if we want to understand how Luis to the power of Teneo helps us go faster about our development, we can highlight several ideas, right? So as we were just saying, on the one hand, we now have twice the number of development resources available to us as developers. I can choose the Teneo resources, I can choose the Luis resources, a combination of both. It's extremely comprehensive. We also have a higher number of pre-built components. We have the connectors, we have the pre-built domains, the intents, the components in Composer, which we will touch on briefly. So a wider number of pre-built components now available to us. Then the fact that Teneo is an end-to-end platform also makes the development process more agile. That means everything is handled within Studio, from design to development to testing, optimization, the publication. We really don't need users, Teneo users, to switch between different applications. They can master the control of the different aspects of the CAI project just using and working in Studio. We also have the built-in analytics suite with out-of-the-box metrics and visualizations, which makes it really easy for developers to start tracking what's happening in those conversations and start optimizing different aspects of those implementations. It can be the NLU foundation with the machine learning model. It can be the performance of dialogues, gaps we may see in our solutions, etc., etc. All of that is pre-built and readily available. With that, what happens is we are supporting multidisciplinary teams. And this takes me to a number of features that are coming in Teneo 6.1, which is going to be released any moment now. And these features revolve around an improved handling of version control, adding flags so that we can tag a stable version, test that stable version, continue development, and then maybe go back to republishing a hotfix on that stable version we had tagged, etc., etc. We will have improved rollback capabilities. So it's basically very heavily supporting those implementation cycles. Then also along those lines, we're opening up some of the APIs, the Teneo APIs. That means we're giving developers more flexibility to also control some of those actions that I was mentioning before are centralized in Studio through a publicly available API. So that means, for instance, running tests remotely through maybe dedicated scripts or publishing the solution, etc., etc. So meaning you don't necessarily have to do it through the interface. You can now use the APIs to control some of those actions. And with that, I think I'm gonna now show a small demonstration. Okay, so let me go into Studio. I'm gonna focus on the first implementation model. Okay, lose to a power of Teneo, what we were just seeing, and for that, we have Teneo Studio here. This is the main development canvas, so to say. We also have what we call the solution backstage with the ability to control more global actions on our solution. And like I was saying, control the publication, the optimization, the testing, etc., etc. But for now, let's go back to the main canvas, and we're gonna open a flow that handles weather requests. Okay, we're gonna take a look at that. I'm gonna open it in edit mode, and what this is at this point, the flow is locked by me, so other teammates will be able to open it in read mode, but won't be able to make changes. But what we see here is the authoring canvas for dialogues. And this is what we're looking at is a truly hybrid flow. Why? Because we have two different triggers or entry points for this dialogue. So we have an entry point that relies, as we have here with our match requirement, relies on a machine learned class. And we will see this class is defined in LUIS. We will see that in a minute. So we have this trigger, pure machine learned trigger. And then we have another follow-up entry point that is purely linguistic. Why? Because it relies on a linguistic condition. It relies on our ontology NLU in order to build a condition that relies on different lexical resources. It relies on pre-built phrases and also certain pre-built components within Teneo. We have the pre-built entity for city or for zip code, for instance. So this follow-up is meant to cater. So this standard trigger, the machine learned one, will take care of standard requests like is it sunny in Atlanta? Give me the forecast for Paris, etc., etc. This linguistic trigger is going to cater for follow-up questions, contextual questions. So if you think about this, how about Barcelona? This is only meaningful in context. Otherwise, it will be ambiguous. So that's why we not only want to create a linguistic condition, but we also want to determine the topic that is relevant for this specific dialogue, right? And this will also be important in our second demonstration. So having said that, the rest of the flow is quite intuitive. So we have our system outputs to gather the location if it's missing from the user input. We will use a transition to capture what the user said. And in this case, we're using Teneo entities. We could use LUIS entities if we wanted. In this implementation, we're going with the Teneo ones. After that, once we have the location, we're gonna call an integration. And this is basically just the interface. What we see here is just like the building block. The logic of this integration is defined in our solution backstage in our integrations manager. But we as CAI developers may not need to know too much about what's happening inside the integration. We just know that we need to pass maybe the city, the postcode, the state, etc., etc., and that once the code snippet has been executed, we will get different values as a result of the API call to the weather service, right? We will get the current conditions and then the temperature in Celsius, Fahrenheit, and even Kelvin. So once we have that information, we're gonna play that back to the user, right? So that's what we see here. Now, let me focus again on the triggers here, okay? On the LUIS trigger we see here. And I'm gonna demonstrate how we create a new trigger in LUIS, okay? So we see here we have this weather inquiry, but let's go ahead and I'm gonna go into our tryout panel, right? This this is actually allowing us to test our dialogues as we implement them, right? So for those of you who are familiar with Composer, it is very similar to the emulator, which we will look into a little bit later. But now I'm going to ask something, and the system is indeed not supposed to understand what I'm going to be asking, okay? So what's the weather like in Tokyo today? Okay, so indeed, I should get this response. And the question is, why am I getting this response? Well, because I have not created an intent in Lewis, right? Let's take a look at Lewis and let's try to see why that is the case, right? So I have the Lewis application that is linked to my solution. Actually, you can follow the instructions in Teneo developers, just, to link your solution, Teneo solution, to the Lewis application. But basically, what happens is if I go here and I search for weather, as we can see here, we haven't created any intents handling weather requests. So let's go ahead and create one really quickly. We're going to add a pre-built intent. That's one of the benefits we get from Lewis. So we're going to search for weather. And I know it's precisely this intent that we need. Let's add it. And let's very quickly take a look at it. So let me find it. We can, just review the training examples here, just to make sure that this is actually matching our needs. So it should be, it should be. Let me check, because yes, this is the one. Okay, yeah. So you can also see we have the annotated entities. We have an entity here for geography. Lewis does that for us. So that's really nice. Now, in order to finish configuring our intent here so that it can be leveraged by Teneo, all we need to do is we need to come back here and copy this class name, right? Weather inquiry. And we're going to rename this to match the name that we have there, right? So we're just going to name this weather inquiry. And now we should try to maybe, let me just edit this so that we can train the model. Let's see. Let's train the model really quickly. And we will just republish this model and see if Teneo is able to pick up this intent as we have created it now. So once the model finishes training, we should see the predictions loaded here. So that means we are good to go. And I'm going to publish a couple of comments. We can enable sentiment analysis, and we can also enable, as we were saying, speech priming for our speech recognizer, right? So I'm going to publish, and it's should be now available. So that means if I go into Teneo here, and I don't, in theory, need to restart the application or anything, I can ask the question again. And in theory, we should be now triggering the flow because we have created the intent in Lewis. So you can see the response that is returned by the flow we were looking at, right? And actually, if I ask something like, what about Chicago? We should see how here the intent that triggered was our machine learned one, And here, the intent that triggered was the linguistic, the follow-up trigger. So this is just, a very high-level overview of how you can start, with a 10-minute setup, just start using LUIS within your solution, right? So having said that, let me go back to our presentation, because after we've seen that, I want to touch on the scalability aspect. So how do we think LUIS to the power of Teneo is helping our CAI solutions scale, right? And in my mind, there are two dimensions in which our solutions can grow, right? So one aspect is the intelligence. So, and there are other sub points within the intelligent dimension, so to say. One of them, of course, is NLU accuracy. And what that means is basically having a good foundation in order to be able to understand what users are saying, right? There's so much you can do if you don't understand what your users are asking about. You can have the most advanced dialogue manager. If you don't have a good NLU foundation, it'll be quite pointless. So the idea is with LUIS to the power of Teneo, you are now using state-of-the-art algorithms for intent recognition. You're using the hybrid model we just looked at. You can also scale in terms of use cases, LOBs, new domains. Well, for that, you now have a wider number of pre-built intents, pre-built domains, the connectors, etc., etc. Integrations. As your solution grows in intelligence, it usually also grows in complexity and in the number of integrations with backend systems or with new front-end channels, for instance. So in terms of scalability and integrations, you have the 18 out-of-the-box backend connectors, Teneo backend connectors, and growing. And you also have, I totally recommend an article Daniel Erickson, our Chief Innovation Officer, wrote recently about how Teneo is the perfect balance between pure coding and drag and drop, among many other aspects. Because with the integrations manager, we just saw it's extremely easy to basically connect with any backend system that would, expose the code or access to those specific actions through an API. Then we have advanced dialogue. That's another aspect. Your solution can grow, right? So just to emphasize, Artificial Solutions has a record of 20 plus years of proven success, working with global enterprises and global solutions. Also catering for very complex use cases in many different countries, and handling very complex conversations, handling interruptions, memory, context, etc., etc. So that is something that's worth bearing in mind, and that LUIS to the power of Teneo can certainly support. Then the other aspect your solution can grow is in terms of exposure, and rollout, right? So you can have your solutions available in new channels. And for that, we have 20 out-of-the-box front-end connectors. You can have your solutions growing into or accessible in new different languages. For that, we have the 86 languages we support, and also the Teneo localization capabilities with the master local structure that my colleagues Joachim and Tim introduced last week. We also may want to expand into new regions. Well, with those 86 languages, we are supporting 40% of the world's population. Modalities. Teneo supports from voice only to multimodal, web, phone, drive-through systems, VR systems, you name it, Teneo has been there. So these are some aspects just attesting to the scalability aspect of Luis to the power of Teneo. And now I'm gonna pause here for a second, and before I introduce the second implementation model, I think I'm gonna share a poll. Let me do that. I'll start it, and yeah, we'll probably take a look at it later at the end, maybe during the Q&A session. But this is just for us to understand what other CAI platforms you may have used or are planning to use. So implementation models, right? Luis to a power of Teneo. How can we introduce it in our projects? We have the model we have been talking about, or I have been introducing up to now, is what we see here. This is an implementation where developers will work in Luis, and they will also work in Teneo Studio. Now, what's unique about this implementation is the natural language understanding layer is going to be a mixed one, as we just saw. It's going to combine elements from Luis and elements from Teneo. However, the dialogue manager, so the conversations are going to be driven and handled exclusively by Teneo, right? So this is the implementation model we just saw. Now, we saw a second scenario, or the need to cover a second scenario where these bot framework developers have already started working in Composer, right? So they may have implemented different use cases using Composer and Luis, and now they're thinking about maybe leveraging some of the Teneo features to go a little bit beyond what they have built, right? So in this approach, it is different from the previous one in that what we will see is not only the NLU is mixed, but also the dialogue manager. So we will have responses coming from Composer. We will have other responses coming from Teneo, the Teneo interaction engine. And this is what I'm gonna introduce now. Things may get a little bit more technical now, but I hope, everyone can follow. So what we see here on the left, this is the development scenario, right? So we're going to have a knowledge base built in Composer. So we will have the known intents for those use cases we may have built already. So those are going to be linked to known intents. So nothing special there. Composer will handle those. However, in this approach, we're going to link our unknown intents to an implementation done in Teneo Studio and published through or available through the Teneo interaction engine. So this is the development scenario. What happens at runtime is it's very simple, actually. So we will have the users interacting with the Microsoft bot, right? They will just enter a request, and the knowledge base in Composer is going to ask, is this intent known? If the answer is yes, Composer or the bot framework will produce that response, and then it will be played back to the users. So nothing special there. However, if the intent is not known, what's going to happen is that request is going to be handed over to Teneo, which will leverage the hybrid NLU. And then Teneo will produce a response that will be sent back to the users. And this should be super transparent for the users. They will not know where the answer is coming from. All they will see is the interaction with this Microsoft bot. And so I'm going to try to show that in Composer now, how we have integrated with Studio for or Teneo with that for that handover. So let me pull my Microsoft bot Composer demonstration here. So basically, in this knowledge base, we have, it's a very small one, right? So we have different dialogues. We have the greeting, we have the weather inquiry, which actually handles requests about the weather, just very similar to the flow that we saw in Teneo a few minutes ago. Then we have other intents or questions, like maybe around, how many languages does the bot speak? Okay. Now, what is just illustrating the architecture we were just going through a couple of minutes ago is this unknown intent, right? So if the solution captures any of these intents, it'll handle them as per the dialogues defined here. Otherwise, if it's an unknown intent, it's going to send the request to Teneo, right? And basically what we have here is a simple HTTP request to the Teneo interaction engine, so that runtime instance of our solution. So we have the endpoint here. Notice we can also pass the weather topic for complex follow-up questions. We can also pass channel and any other input parameter we may want for Teneo to take into account. Now, what happens is once we get the reply from Teneo, we just store it in a specific property, and we can even go further and break, that aggregated property into smaller chunks. We can do that, and the final or end result is we will just play back the Teneo response to the user. We can see a couple of dialogues here. I think this is super interesting. so when we start this bot, we were just looking at, we can ask, as I was saying, certain questions like how many languages do you speak? And this will be handled by the composer knowledge base, right? So no, nothing special there, right? So this is interpreted as a language inquiry by Lewis, and then we're just producing the response. Now, if we go into the rest of the dialogue, we can see here, what is the weather like today? And then we are prompted to specify or to provide a zip code. Well, that is also handled by a composer in this case, okay? So we can come here and then we can see that. What is the weather like today, right? Luis picked that up, no issues. So what we see here is composer handling that scenario. Now, what is really, really interesting is what happens when we ask a follow-up question. What about Chicago, right? So in this case, what is happening is we are going to get the Lewis prediction, right? And we see it's a very low score. So it is going to be below our acceptance threshold. That means it is an unknown intent. It is considered as an unknown intent, and it is sent to Teneo, right? We can see that right here. We can see that we are sending this request like we saw before to the Teneo interaction engine point with the weather topic and the channel. And the response you see here is the one that is actually coming from Teneo, from the flow we were looking at earlier today. So basically, this is the trigger that captured what about Chicago, right, with the weather topic and our linguistic condition, and produced the response we see here, right? Teneo, in this case, is also handling other small talk requests, like, can you tell me a joke? It is sent to Teneo, Teneo responds, and the user gets the response back. We are also using a Q&A maker integration for just retrieving FAQs in that solution. So all of these answers are coming from that other component. So very versatile. I hope you, this appeals to those teams who are working in Composer at the moment. We're working with a team within Microsoft. Querying, I don't know if you are around, but thanks very much for all the help. So we are thinking about releasing this as a component so that it can be easily added to Composer knowledge bases, and maybe also exploring the concept of bot framework skills. So that's something that's still to come. But we wanted to introduce this second implementation model today. And basically, this is just a summary. I won't go in detail into everything, but let me just highlight. With this approach, you can go about creating an advanced safety net for your bot, leveraging pre-built modules or pre-built knowledge bases in Studio. You can take advantage of the hybrid NLU, as we saw with that What About Chicago case. You can maybe try to build more complex SAP flows with more complex integrations in Studio, and then just, pass them over to Teneo from Composer. And then you can add that support for the additional languages that Teneo supports. Finally, just maybe highlight this idea that with Lewis to the power of Teneo, we're making it even easier to be part of the Microsoft ecosystem. So as I said, we're now exploring working with the bot framework skills, where you can publish your Teneo solution as a bot framework skill, so that as your bots can consume them. So that would be using Orchestrator for routing intents. We are releasing a Power BI integration soon, so that you can track and visualize your metrics in a Power BI dashboard out of the box. And also looking to release that Q&A maker connector that I was just briefly mentioning. And having said that, maybe time now for a recap and just emphasize some of the takeaways from today. So here again, mention the fact that all of these tools are offered in an integrated way. So everything is just ready to be used and leveraged in your solutions. That's one of the benefits of Lewis to the power of Teneo. You don't have to work on these integrations yourself. Then there's the fact that Lewis to the power of Teneo, and Teneo in itself, is a very modular and robust end-to-end platform. You can swap different components really easily, and that's where we're heading in the roadmap of our platform. So with the public APIs and some other initiatives around integrating design into Teneo, etc., etc. And then there's the fact that ubiquitous is a word we have been using for years. It's become really trendy recently, of course, since it was used for Alexa only last week. But with Teneo, as we saw, it's extremely easy to become truly ubiquitous and expand to other channels, languages, countries, and support those global enterprise rollouts. And yeah, basically now it's just time to invite everyone to Teneo.ai. That's our Teneo developers site. So that you can get started using not only Teneo but also Lewis in your bot implementations. That's my email there in case you would like to ask any follow-up questions. Now I think let me maybe stop sharing, and what I'll do is I'll just try to maybe respond. Let me see, stop sharing. Yeah, let me see if I can maybe try to respond to a few questions. Let me see what we have here. Let me see. Well, before that, I am gonna I'm gonna just review the results for the poll. So it seems we have 83% of the people who responded using Teneo and or Lewis to the power of Teneo, and then 16% using Microsoft Lewis. We don't seem to have any participants using IBM, Dialogflow, or others. So yeah, that's very promising. I hope everything we shared today was of interest to everyone. And yeah, let me see if I can answer some of these questions. So what do I have here? can I still use the native intent classifier and entity recognition features within Teneo, or will those be deprecated in favor of the ones provided by Lewis? Could I potentially design a solution that leverages both? Yes, absolutely. As we saw in that previous implementation, you as a developer have the choice to use either Lewis or the native features. You can go with maybe entities in Lewis and then intents in Teneo. You could do that. Or you could even use an implementation where you leverage the information you get both from Lewis and from Teneo. In terms of intent recognition, entity sentiment analysis, for instance, sentiment is a good example since Lewis follows a stochastic approach, and then Teneo uses a linguistic-based approach for sentiment detection. So you could leverage a combination of both. Is it possible to migrate the classes I've created in Teneo Studio to Lewis, or will I need to create them all over? Yes, we have the ability to convert a Teneo solution into a .lu file that you can then import in Lewis. So if you already have some intents in Teneo, it should be very straightforward and clean for you to import all of those into Lewis and start managing those in Lewis. And yeah, then I see a question here about integrating with Microsoft Teams. That is something we already have. It's available on our Teneo developers site. Yeah, it's the connector is there, and it walks you the instructions there will walk you through how to create that communication channel so that you can interact with your Teneo bot within Teams. Yeah, that's already available. And don't know if we have time for one more question. Your new proposition seems to be heavily focused on Microsoft. Are you able to integrate with other frameworks? Yes, absolutely, as well. Yeah, there are no restrictions. We're favoring Microsoft because of the partnership and because we have this opportunity to combine these two technologies and, offer them in an integrated way to our developers, but we can connect to any other NLU providers, APIs, open APIs, just handling intent recognition, entity identification, etc., sentiment analysis. Yeah, there's no limits, no restriction. And well, I think I see another question here about how fast easy is it to translate an English bot to French or German. For that, I totally recommend watching the other webinar we had last week, where my colleagues focus on that topic specifically, but it would be the implementation time can be cut down in a very relevant way, so that it's easier to localize a solution in a different language. I think I think this should be everything for today. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar, and thank you so much for being here. Take care. Bye bye.